Hello and welcome to Neo Psychology with me, Mr. Neo. Today we're continuing with aggression, specifically lesson 6, the ethological explanations of aggression evaluation. Last lesson we had a look at the ethological explanations. We're going to have a look at that a little bit further and then look at how we can evaluate such things. Here's the starter for today. To what extent do you agree with the statement? Explain your answer. So we've got a nice multicultural gang here, right? Look, they're from all different three different cultures here. I think we've covered it nicely, right? Being aggressive is just part of our nature. We can't help it. It's part of our nature. We can't help it. It's just who we are. It's in our genes. To what extent do you agree with that statement? And then explain why you agree with that statement, right? Why do you agree with it? Why don't you agree with it if you don't agree with it? Think about it. Think about some of the things we learned so far. We've learned different perspectives. We've learned about different attitudes to aggression and how we might understand it in different terms. Let's continue for today. So we've got 2 learning objectives today. 1, show comprehension and recap knowledge of aggression from the last 5 lessons. And then 2, to be able to discuss and evaluate the ethological explanations of aggression. Let's get started on learning objective 1. Show comprehension and apply knowledge of aggression from the last 5 lessons. How has the last 5 lessons help us understand aggression better? Here we go. So I've got a nice table here. Complete the table, right? We've got the last 5 lessons. What elements affect aggression? We've got neuronal mechanisms, hormonal mechanisms, genetic factors, and ethological explanations. Right. So let's start with the neural mechanisms. What element affects aggression? What were the 2 things we learned about in that lesson that we found that affects aggression? It was the limbic system, which is found in the brain, in case you didn't know where your brain was, and serotonin. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter also found within the brain and within the body. How does that element affect aggression? How does the limbic system and serotonin affect our aggression? Overactive amygdala in the limbic system is linked to aggressive behavior. So in the limbic system, there's one specific part in the limbic system which affects aggression or emotional behavior, and that is the amygdala. And what it found is when you have an overactive amygdala, it could lead and is linked to aggressive behavior. Now with serotonin, how does serotonin affect our aggression from what we've learned? What we found is normal levels of serotonin are linked with good self-control. If I've got normal levels of serotonin, my levels of serotonin are really good, they're all normal, that's really good, and I've got good self-control because of that. Low levels of serotonin are linked to reactive and impulsive behavior, such as aggression. So if you have low levels of serotonin, that can lead to more reactive and impulsive behavior. You might be more impulsive, you might be able to not control yourself as much, and this could lead to aggression. Right? This is one of my arguments why I say, you shouldn't take drugs, because your body most of the time is such a perfect balance of all these different hormones, all these different neurotransmitters, and when you take drugs recreationally, they can affect those levels and it can affect them permanently, and you don't want to do that because you don't know what's working well right now and what drug might affect it. Stay clean. Right. Hormonal mechanisms. We had a look at testosterone. The role of testosterone, how did that affect aggression, right? Testosterone is the male androgen hormone, right? It's one of the male hormones. It's the main one, to be honest. How does testosterone affect aggression? Higher levels of testosterone are linked with high levels of aggression. This might explain why men are generally more aggressive than women. Genetic factors. What did we find out in genetic factors? What parts of genetics might affect aggression? What gene was it again? MOAOM. MAOAM. The MAOA gene responsible for activity in the enzyme monoamine oxidase A. Right? And what about that gene? How does that affect aggression? Tell me a bit more about it. All right, I will. Low activity variant of the MAOA gene is closely associated with aggressive behavior, right? So if you have low activity of that gene, it can cause aggression. What we found was aggression. We found there was one Dutch family in particular that shared this gene, and they were found to be really aggressive and really horrible. Yes. Findings backed up with concordance rates of 40 to 50% with twin and adoption studies. This shows there are environmental factors to consider too. So the twin and the adoption studies found that, yeah, in 40 to 50% of cases of aggression, it was to do with genetics. However, that is a really high contributing factor. You go, oh, well, a lot of your aggression, at least half of it or around half of it, comes down to your genetics. However, that means that the other half of it comes down to all these other factors. So it's not a full explanation. And then last lesson we had a look at the ethological explanations through animal studies. Innate releasing mechanisms and fixed action patterns. And how does that affect us? Well, aggression is seen as an innate behavior necessary for survival as witnessed by animal studies, right? So this was done through animal studies and it understood aggression in terms of survival with the animals. Next lesson, we have a look at evolutionary responses to aggression, which understands aggression in terms of survival, but through human research. Aggression is activated through a fixed action pattern when encountering a threat. So you go through a step-by-step process on how you deal with aggression. And there we go. There was a nice little recap of the last 5 lessons. Identify one thing you learned from the recap of the last 5 lessons. Nothing, because I knew it already. Brilliant. Good job. Why do you think recapping of the last 5 lessons is important? Helps us remember it better, you know? It's really important. It's really good that you understand all this stuff right now. And then when it comes to the exam at the end of the second year, you can recap over it. And because you won't be learning it for the first time, you're more likely to remember it. So it's important to recap over it. How does what we just learned apply in real life? Well, we're just understanding aggression a bit better, you know. Before we did this module, we probably didn't know that much about aggression. You might have been an aggressive person, you might not be an aggressive person, but now you understand it better. And if someone was to come to you and say, "Oh, I'm quite an aggressive person," you go, "Oh, well, if we look at it from the hormonal perspective, or from another genetic perspective, you might understand it better in those terms." If you've got any questions about those, please let me know. Write them in the comments or email me. You know my email. School email, of course. Don't have to say that. Learning Objective 1, show comprehension and recap knowledge of aggression from the last 5 lessons. Ticking that off. Nice job, gang. Learning Objective 2, what we're here for today, is to be able to discuss and evaluate the ethological explanations of aggression. Let's have a look at that now. Evaluation. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of the ethological explanation of aggression? What are some of the weaknesses? What are some of the strengths? Think about them from your own perspective before I give them to you. Use the grave and scout technique. Is it generalizable? Maybe not. It was done with animals, so maybe it's not. Grave. R. Reliable. Is it reliable? Why isn't it reliable? A. Application. How does it apply to real life? Is this research really helpful? If it is, that's a good point to put as well. It doesn't always evaluation or criticism don't always need to be negative. It's good to give strengths as well. So here's the first evaluative point we're going to look at. In previous lessons, we considered research by Brunner et al. 1993 showing that low activity variant of the Mauer gene is closely associated with aggressive behavior in humans, suggesting an innate basis. Neuronal mechanisms in aggression also presented evidence for the existence of innate releasing mechanisms for aggression in the brain activity in the limbic system and has shown to trigger aggressive behavior in humans and other animals. As the ethological explanation argues that aggression is genetically determined and heritable, meaning it can be inherited from your parents, its validity is supported by evidence that demonstrates the genetic and physiological basis of aggression. And this is what it's done. So it's supporting the point. This research is supporting the research found by Mauer gene and is supporting found by the limbic system. So is this a strength or a weakness? Well, it's research supporting it, so it is a strength. Let's have a look at the next point. Cultural differences in aggression. Oh, there's variation among different cultures, as is everything. There is evidence that aggressive behavior is more common in some human cultures than in others. For example, Nisbet found there was a north-south divide in the United States for homicide rate, so that's murder. Killings are much more common amongst white males in the southern states than in the northern states. Because this was only true for reactive aggression triggered by arguments, Nisbet concluded that the difference in homicide rates was caused by a culture of honor. In other words, the response to impulsive aggression was a learned social norm. It isn't because of your genetics, it was learnt. It isn't a determined thing that happens when you get intimidated. It's not a fixed action pattern. It was a learnt response. This was supported in a lab study by Nisbet and his colleagues, who found that when white males from the South were insulted in a research situation, they were more likely than northern white males to become aggressive. That sounds like an interesting study. So Nisbet, what's this plan for your study? Basically, I'm going to get a load of white dudes, some from the north, some from the south. I'm going to insult them and see how they react. Maybe I think the one, and see which ones react worse. The ones from the south apparently were a lot more aggressive. Good luck with that, mate. Cool. Is it difficult for ethological research with its view of aggression as intrinsic to explain how culture can override innate influences? So what this research by Nisbet is essentially saying is those white people from the north and from the south, they should be genetically similar. They should have similar survival tactics, right? Because they would have survived over millions of years just as everyone else has done. So they should have the same genetic survival determined mechanisms in their body. However, what they found was those from the north were a lot less aggressive than those from the south, which showed that there must be some sort of cultural difference here. These cultural differences in the southern males, in the southern white males, found that there's a honor, that there's a culture of honor, that is they learn that, oh, don't get disrespected by him, stand up for yourself. So it's shown that, yeah, aggression might not necessarily be just ethological and genetic. There are other environmental factors to consider as well, because the only difference between the north and the south people that were white was the fact that they were from the north and from the south. Genetically, they were very similar. Is this a strength or a weakness? Well, this is going to be a weakness because it's contrary to what this understanding of ethological explanations of aggressions are. Here's our next point. Evidence against ritualistic aggression. The view that aggression has evolved into a self-limiting and relatively physically harmless ritual has been challenged by observations made by Jane Goodall of chimpanzees at the Goodall Stream National Park in Tanzania. Jane Goodall is a really famous researcher who's done lots of research with great apes. It might be chimpanzees, it might be gorillas, it might be monkeys. But she's done lots of research looking at these animals and how they act. And one way of understanding humans, of course, from the ethological perspective, is to understand these great apes as well. Because you might argue that, well, if you look back in history, maybe we had similar behavior. So if we understand their behavior, maybe we can generalize those findings to us. During what she called the 4-Year War, male chimps from one community set about systematically slaughtering all the members of another group. Gang violence, chimpanzee gang violence. Stay safe. Why do I do this? They did this in a coordinated and premeditated fashion. On some occasions, a victim was held down by some rival chimpanzees while others hit and bit it in an attack lasting up to 20 minutes. When someone goes chimpanzees, you think, oh, chimpanzees are so cute. But actually, no, they're horrible sometimes. The violence continued like this despite the fact that the victims were offering signals of appeasement and defenselessness. These signals did not inhibit the aggressive behavior of the attacking chimps as predicted by the ethological explanation. So, according to this ethological explanation with the ritualistic aggression, similar to the wolves, when the wolves showed their neck to show appeasement, I'm backing down, I'm defenseless, this was not found amongst all animals. With the chimpanzees, they were doing these gang attacks on other rival gang chimps. And when they were defenseless and lying there, they were not going, oh, let's back up now, let's back off. No, 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 they were still attacking until they were killed. So it's showing that, is this a strength or a weakness? Well, this is a weakness because it's contrary to what this theory is suggesting. The ethological explanation is suggesting that if they're showing appeasement, if they're defenseless, then they're likely to back down because they truly they do want their genes to survive. But this was not the case. FAPs are not that fixed. Morton Hunt points out that the sequence of behaviors that appear to be fixed and unchanging are in fact greatly influenced by environmental factors and earning experiences. So fixed action patterns are more flexible than implied by the term fixed. Many ethologists now prefer the term modal action patterns to reflect this. For instance, a FAP is typically made up of several aggressive behaviors in a series. Yeah, they are. The duration of each behavior varies from one individual animal to another, and even in the same animal from one encounter to another. So, is this point a strength or a weakness? This is going to be a weakness because it's contrary to what they said. They said FAPs are fixed. However, this research done by Hunt is suggesting actually they're not fixed and they're modal. They can change, they're flexible. Does the flexibility of FAPs reduce the validity of the ethological explanation of aggression? Explain your answer. Let's have a look. This does not necessarily reduce the validity of the ethological explanation. This is because the explanation can readily adapt to account for the idea that sequences of aggressive behavior does not occur on an identical manner across all individuals of a species. In other words, this flexibility is itself innate and instinctive. This is confirmed by the fact that ethologists increasingly accept that FAPs are flexible and the term itself is used less than it once was, being greatly replaced by MAPs now, or modal action patterns. However, there is a counter-argument. As the aggressive behaviors that make up a FAP can vary between individuals and situations, at least to a limited extent, this raises questions about exactly how innate and instinctive aggression really is. Is it really instinctive? The flexibility of FAPs may imply that aggressive behaviors can be learned or at least affected by environmental influences, which does challenge the validity of the ethological explanation. And here's the last evaluation point we're looking at today. Unjustified generalization to humans. Lorenz did not study higher mammals such as primates, and Tinbergen chose not to study the kind of extremely destructive violence that is all too frequent feature of human aggression. However, they both made generalizations about aggressive behaviors in humans, including warfare. Right? Warfare is a lot more complex than one may argue, and I don't think it could be argued in terms of research that was done by geese or fish. Lorenz also extrapolated from the behavior of individual animals to the behavior of entire countries and states. But as the anthropologist Robin Fox points out, war is a collective undertaking that cannot be explained by any individual impulse, right? No individual aggressive impulse can explain something as complex and political as warfare. Is this point a strength or a weakness? Well, this has got to be a strength. How generalizable is the research that's done by fish and geese to human aggression? So that's a weakness. Here's the question. Explain why it may not be valid to make such generalizations to human aggression and how this underlies the validity of the ethological explanation. Here's the answer. It is not valid to make generalizations from animal to human aggression without evidence. Lorenz and Tinbergen assumed that the behavior they had observed in birds and fish must also be typical of humans. Therefore, aggression must be instinctive and innate in humans too. We should be extremely cautious about making such generalizations, especially to the behaviors such as warfare, which he tried to do, which is extremely complex and the outcome of many varied and interacting influences, including learning. So here's the question. Outline one strength and one weakness of the ethological explanation of aggression. Answer the question in a Peel paragraph structure, please. And there's the evaluation. Identify one important thing you learned from the evaluation. Why do you think learning about the evaluation is important? It helps us critically analyze things better. How does the evaluation apply in real life? Well, it helps you understand how there can be pros and cons about any theory. And then any other questions? What questions has the evaluation raised for you? What are you still wondering about? Again, write them down. If you're not confident of something, ask your colleagues, ask other students, or ask myself. And there we go. We're going to tick off learning objective 2 to be able to discuss and evaluate the ethological explanation of aggression. Time for the plenary. Here we go. 6 questions, answer them, see how you do, and then we're going to go through the answers. Number 1. An important adaptive function of aggression is to A. Kill potential competitors. B. Make sure every animal has a similar status within the group. C. To reduce pressure on resources such as food. And D. Distribute access to fertile females equally. A, B, C, or D? What do you think? What do I think? Thank you for asking. I think it is C. To reduce pressure on resources such as food. Smashed it. Number 2. An innate releasing mechanism is A. A collection of stereotyped aggressive behaviors. B. An environmental stimulus that triggers a fixed action pattern. C. A response that is learned through experience. Or D. A biological structure or process. An innate releasing mechanism. I think it's D. Let's go with D. Good, D. Well done to me, the teacher. A biological structure or process. Number 3. One feature of a fixed action pattern, FAP, is that A. It can be found in the brain. B. Responds directly to an environmental stimulus. C. Follows a predictable sequence that is always completed. Or D. Occurs in many situations, many different situations. One feature of a fixed action pattern. I'm going to go with B or C. What are you going for? I'll go with you then. I'm going to go B. I mean C. Number 4. Oh gosh, I suck. The ethological explanation of aggression is supported by research that shows A. Aggression is mostly influenced by cultural factors. B. Genetic and neural mechanisms are major influences on aggression. C. Non-human animals frequently use aggression to kill. Or D. Fixed action patterns are fairly flexible. I'm going to go ethological explanation of aggression is supported by research that shows genetic and neuronal mechanisms are major influences on aggression. So B. Good. Jane Goodall's observation of chimpanzees challenge ethological theory because A. Chimpanzees wouldn't sit still. B. Appeasement signals did not inhibit aggressive behavior. C. Chimpanzees are not very aggressive animals. Or D. She found that chimpanzees do not establish dominant hierarchies. That's not true. What are you going to go for? I'm going to go for B. Don't trust me. I don't get them all right. Even though I made the lessons. Right. I'm going to go with B. I'm right. Jobber. Number 6. Number 6. Last one. Blah. Research shows that aggression is not entirely instinctive because A. There are evolutionary reasons why we are aggressive. B. Aggressive behaviors between members of the same species are ritualistic. C. It is more common in some cultures than in other cultures. Or D. Some research shows it is closely associated with the Mao gene. Research shows that aggression is not entirely instinctive because I'm going to personally go with C because it shows that it's common in some cultures, not others. C. Yeah. Right, how did you do on that one? How did you do out of 6? I did 5, so I'm just a decent student. I'm not a legend like some of you that do really well. Um, here's a video. Check out the video. This is Jane Goodall, right? She's very famous. She's a very famous ethologist, right? She's been studying and living. She's essentially lived with chimpanzees and gorillas and all these other chimps and monkeys, I don't know specifics, all these other primates essentially for years and years and years. She submerges them herself in that culture, in their troop, they're called, a group is called a troop, for years, right? And then she sees how they act and understands it better. Here she's talking about the dark side of chimpanzees when she talks about the aggression. Are you an absolute legend? Did you get 6 out of 6? If you did, great job. And there we go. There's the lesson for today. Thank you for joining the lesson today. Today was lesson 6, and we learned about the ethological explanation of aggression evaluation. Be sure to write up your notes and email them to me before the end of the week. Well done, my neo-psychologist. Keep up the brilliant work. I've been Mr. Neo. God bless. Peace.